Hey everybody, it's the Old Wolf here again for another episode of the Witch and the Wolf Wisdom Podcast. Coming at you live from Rochester, New York. It is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tuesday, August 30th, 2022. Want to real quick shout out to my kid sister Felicia and my good friend and brother Frank Tonra. Both have birthdays today. I doubt either one of you will be listening, but hey, happy birthday anyway. So yes, tonight's episode, Defense Against the Dark Arts. One of the things, for anybody that's been following me, you know that I believe that magic is a part of our lives. Unfortunately, the word magic has become so stereotyped that it's very difficult to separate what is real versus what is not. And as I've mentioned many times, what is real changes depending upon context, perspective, time. The analogy being what was magic 200 years ago is now technology. It is science. So I'm going to hit on some of the things that I believe are the best defenses against the dark arts. And the dark arts is a generic framework for a lot of different things. Perspective being what it is, everybody has a different take on what's dark and what's not. But hopefully, you know, as I like to say again, take what you need, leave the rest behind. You'll find something within this that works for you, or if nothing else, gives you a little bit of a different perspective, insight, whatever you want to call it. Now, again, as always, we have a lot of people who have been part of this circle, who have supported us, and we like to, in return, support them. So I'm going to start off with my sister Suzanne in Mystical Moons. She has a lot of great insight into not only the ritual end of things, but the elemental aspects. And crystals, gems, rocks, these are an old world dynamic that is reflective throughout cultures. And she's somebody that not only understands it, but has, as they say, a nose for it. So it's not just, again, in the dynamics of the jewelry and stuff, but just within the raw elements themselves. Now you can check her out. She runs lives on Facebook, facebook.com/mysticalmoonslive. But you can also check her out on the web at www.mysticalmoons.com. And just mention myself or the witch, Lady Shiya, and get 25% off your first order. She's been a longtime supporter. She's a great woman with a lot of insight. So definitely go check her out. Also within our framework are our sisters, Bobby and Sherry. And again, moonbeams touches a lot of different dynamics, not just, again, within the jewelry and elements, but within some of the more obscure dynamics within magic, within ritual. And yeah, a lot of it's really cool. I know Shiya just recently...
I just got 2 new bracelets from them.
Why don't you tell them about that?
Well, one of them was lapis and apatite together. And they look like little globes, and she put a beautiful little peace charm on it. And it's kind of like for peace in our hearts, that we promote world peace by starting in our own little environment. And then, of course, my favorite, my kind of miniature ball of shit bracelet, which is mahogany obsidian. Yes, absorbing and getting rid of negativity and pain, along with some obsidian beads that are on there as well. And some jet, so it's a very nice protective, you know, healing, get rid of pain, emotional, physical, and otherwise kind of bracelet. That was a special order. I told her I wanted this, and she's like, okay, here you go. Well, how does this look? I said, that looks perfect. And she said, okay, and there it goes. I have my custom bracelet with exactly the stones I wanted.
Well, no coincidence in talking about defense against the dark arts. Ritual and the symbolic dynamics, the energy that we manifest, that we can infuse, can be imbued into objects.
Yes.
Be it a crystal, be it wood, be it any number of dynamics. And again, you know, we're not just customers, we're friends of theirs. And let me tell you, they legitimately know their shit. So you're not just getting a piece of jewelry or just a candle or just this. You're getting dynamics that not only they themselves use and have checked out, but it's also reflective of the energy of the magic that they put into it. And that is, by its very definition, part of the philosophy of strength in numbers. So check them out, Moonbeams on Facebook and Instagram. And again, same context, mention the witch, get 20% off your first order. So yeah, definitely tell them that the witch sent you. Good evening, Gloria. Thank you for joining us. Now again, one of my favorites, because again, I'm a dream walker, is our sister Ashley Hart, Heart's Creations, Dream Catchers with Intention. When you want to talk about defense against the dark arts, dream catchers are, again, a very old concept, a very old ritualistic dynamic that, speak of the witch, there she is, our sister Ashley Hart.
She shows up right when we're talking about
listen, that's the beauty of magic.
That is, yeah.
Dream catchers are an incredibly powerful defense against so many different elements. They're not just about dreams. They're about negative energies. They're about, again, the very core element of ritual, of spellcraft. Again, whatever words you want to put on it. But they're not just, again, reflective of, okay, throw some shit together, here you go. They are created. And again, that manifestation of the creator, aka Ashley, is incredibly powerful. And it's incredibly important because just like anything, you can take pieces of something and you can throw them together in a pot and you may not necessarily end up with what you want. So there is, again, a legitimate context here for knowledge, okay? And Ashley not only has the knowledge, but has the true spirit, the true intent behind that. So again, dream catchers with intention is a real fucking thing. You know, it is reflective of her magic, and it is an incredibly powerful defense. Check her out, www.facebook.com/heartscreations, and that's hearts, Harts creations.
I know, just sitting where I'm at, I can look around and see 5 of her dream catchers right here.
Oh yeah, we have them all over.
And
they all have different,
above your bed, 6.
Right. They all have different, I guess you could say,
intentions,
dynamics to them. Like I said, it's not just about dreams, but there are other, aspects in how you create the framework for energy within your household.
Speaking of good energy and wishing somebody the best of all energy, Jan Ivy.
Yes.
Still in the hospital, but pushing it through, making it happen, and not quitting.
Sister fighting strong every day. Great to see you, hon. Hope you're feeling a little bit better.
My inspiration, girl.
So yes, welcome, brother, to Jonathan, Bradley Mathis, Sabrina, Shannon, Elizabeth Brown, Jennifer Green.
Hello, my
everybody.
nephew.
Thank you as always for joining us. So yeah, definitely go check out Ashley. She knows her shit.
Look, I have the entire Defense Against the Dark Arts right here. I've got a redheaded nephew, Bradley. We can just stick him out in front of us, and he can just suck up all the souls, okay?
Well,
Bradley will eat all of their souls for us, and he will say thank you.
I'm not sure that's really, fair to him. That's like saying, hey, come here, my friend. Let me throw you into this septic tank. And
I just had to shout out to my nephew.
Just let all the fecal matter stick to you. So that's just not really at least in my humble opinion, the recommended approach.
I have every confidence in my nephew. He could absolutely kick some butt. But I had to give him shit.
Listen, brother, I got your back on this. I get it. We live in a world now where, I guess men are almost, we're paying some heavy prices. You're all like ready to throw your nephew under the fucking bus. And,
oh, he knows. I'm just picking.
Yeah. That's what the witch is always like, don't worry about it.
Craft books that I gave him when he was
I wouldn't throw this lit match in the oven if my friend Bradley were in there, would I?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, you might, witch, you might.
You might.
Oh, well, listen, if you fall asleep, that's fine. Listen, and again, you got honey bringing you a burrito. Well, listen,
There you
burrito
go.
is a beautiful thing.
Better than hospital food.
Brother Jonathan, you went to the surgeon today, getting imaging done, and hopefully it'll be benign. Yeah, listen, hang in there.
Yep.
Hopefully it isn't anything off the wall. But listen, we back each other up to the best of our abilities.
Amen.
With what we can when we can. So you hang in there, my brother. Weather is definitely playing hell, Jen. Listen, welcome to the wonderful world we live in. But you hang in there as well too. Bradley's like, yeah, no, he's laughing his ass off. He says, my soul-stealing days are over. Yeah, you say that today, but...
Uh-huh. Somebody messes with your girl. Yeah, you'll go out. You'll soul steal.
Hey, listen, with any luck, brother, it's something they can contend and deal with, and, not going to be anything that you got to carry on. Again, the human condition is such, especially with the types of things that we're exposed to. It's a die roll sometimes, and a lot of people are dealing with it from a lot of different things. I know, Jan's dealing with it. Our friend, a few people that we know that have been dancing within, the spectrum of, fighting the shitty energies and dynamics that,
Absolutely.
that pollute, contaminate our bodies. You know what I mean? And then again, some of it goes into the dynamics that there really is. And let's be honest about it. So much we can control. A lot of these factors and things, as horrible as this is to say, depending upon where you live, the air you breathe. You know what I mean? Maybe the variable in play, wherever you get your particular food. And not even so much the choice of your food, but where you're actually fucking getting it.
Yeah.
Actually comes into play. The water that you drink, and all these types of things are very difficult. We live in a world, at least within Western culture, where everything is processed to some degrees, or goes through these different systems, or is impacted by this, that, and the other thing. And again, I try and look at things, sometimes, at least in the baseline, from the more practical context that we can do. Finally, but as always, not last, my brother, Tattoo Tony.
Oh, he did such a
did
good
incredible
job
work
on my arm.
on Shiya's tattoo. It's incredibly beautiful.
I need to update that photo from the black and
Yes,
white.
yes.
Color now.
Yeah, we'll
Yes.
definitely get around to some of that element. But yeah, incredible tattoo artist, incredible business guy, designer, papostickercompany.com, Under My Skin Tat number 2.com for the tattoo shop. Again, he's a world-renowned tattoo artist. I would, again, if you're into that kind of thing and you can get your ass down to the Jersey Shore, he's definitely a guy to go see. But he's also the core and the bass player, writer, producer for Broken Past. You can check them out at brokenpastnewjersey.com. I'm actually going to play a little bit from a couple of old live recordings when me and my son, the monkey, were a part of Broken Past originally. They do have a new lineup now and a great bunch of guys. You got Tony Rodriguez. You've got Frank Casey on vocals. You got Brian Stagger on drums. And you got Wayne White on guitar. These guys also will be playing.
I really enjoyed hanging out with Brian and Wayne this past weekend.
They're great. Listen, they're all good guys.
They're good guys.
But they will be performing this year. The Under My Skin for Life Foundation presents Arts for Autism, September 17, 2022, in Port Monmouth, New Jersey. Going to be working with the local rat station, WRAT, The Rat. You got Gene Snitsky coming to Samoa, Noe, Jose Hernandez Jr., whole bunch of bands, Broken Path, Spawn Wrench, Legion, Elliot Mayer, Exit Strategy, which I do not have. I got to get the updated flyer going on here. But yeah, and myself, and my son, and some other guys, Danny Watts, Greg Carr-Subin, Bruce J., Pocket Full of Wolves.
Yes.
So it's a free event. It's going to be running pretty much all day.
The most important thing.
What's the most important thing?
Free hugs from Shiya.
Yeah, Shiya's going to go around touching people, so if you're into that kind of thing.
I'm going to hug my people that come. If you guys come up and say you want a hug, I'm going to give you a hug. I may douse myself in...
See, that's a witch thing. We wolves don't roll like that.
No.
All right, so just as a fair warning, okay?
The witch is the hugger.
I truly do love you all, but my wolf nature is such that if you roll up on me unannounced, uninvited, and or catch me
the witch will
unaware,
between you and the witch will give you a hug.
Now, the wolf might bite you, okay? I'm just going to be honest. That's what wolves do, okay?
Yep.
Now, I won't kill you, but, yeah, you might get bit.
As far as the tap water in Oklahoma City, God's only know if any of the tap water is any good anymore.
Listen, I don't even want to get started on that. I need like 12 podcasts running at 4 hours each to even begin to scratch the surface.
Yep.
So, yes, come out and check out the Arts for Autism event. Sabrina's like she's had COVID like 16 times since it came out.
Yeah, I know.
We've danced. I know. It's like, you know, you almost feel like that there's not a whole lot. Gary's like, he bites back. Yeah, well, listen, you know how this goes then, man.
The space of the wolf,
you know, I put it out there honestly, and, you know, those that know me know that there's an aura and energy about me. If you know me, it's cool. You're good. Mm-hmm. Okay? But especially in the context, if I don't have a cognitive recognition of who a person is, and that's no offense to anybody, you know, again, I've never met Shannon in person. So if Shannon were to roll up on me without me knowing who Shannon is, as a fucking wolf, my first instinct is going to be to bite. It's not personal. It's just who I am. Now, I'll throw that warning out. I'll growl. Yeah. You'll see my fur stand up and shit. You know what I mean? And if you're cool, in the moment, if you don't try and force it, I'll read you for who you are, and then we can chill. Okay?
There you go.
And then I got your back. Okay? But that's just how it is. Penna, thank you for that. It's just something that started up about a year ago, and we've mentioned the story a couple times, but it was really a funny dynamic. We were hanging out on one of Shiya's lives, and the subject came up, and she just basically threw it to me, and she knows.
To do a podcast.
Well, what happened was I just started talking like I fucking do, and I tend to speak openly and honestly, and the person on the live was like, I don't want to hear you.
Actually, she's like, doesn't he have a place of his own?
She didn't want to hear me. She wanted to hear Shiya, and fair enough, you know, appreciate that. She's like, well, why don't you go start your own fucking podcast? So Shiya and I looked at each other, like, that's a great fucking idea.
That's a great fucking idea. And here we are.
So I started a fucking podcast so that I could just, you know, some of it is, for me personally, and I've mentioned this before, about passing along some of the dynamics that I've learned, my opinions, my perspectives, my fears, my hopes. And again, with, you know, a basic framework that if it helps one person along the way, then you know what? I'm putting something back out there. Some of it also is to document certain elements of things, to say, hey, you know what I mean? This is here. This is this. It's not just an open-ended, like a fart floating in the wind. There's a real dynamic.
Yeah. And you're turning around and framing it out that, you know, we should be able to have these open and honest conversations and still maintain good vibes and a friendship with each other, you know? Even if we disagree sometimes.
Yeah, listen, again, I try very hard to be open-minded to the best I can. Now, I have certain dynamics. And again, some of the running jokes, and for those of you who haven't been with us before or just joining us back or just to be fucking redundant, Scientologists can go fuck themselves, okay? I have no flexibility when it comes to Scientologists. I'm sorry.
I don't think Scientologists are flexible enough to fuck themselves.
That, you know, those are some of my, like, okay, this line, no, fuck you. Nazis. Sorry, fuck you. Child molesters, and you know, this is not like child molesters with an asterisk. Well, she was only 16. No, fuck you.
I
child molesters
in that new Game of Thrones. You know, oh, that's
Oh, that was horrible.
You don't. There's his ball.
It's like, here's my 12-year-old daughter. You know what I mean? You don't have to bed her. No.
You just ripped
fuck
off
that.
Balls, man.
And again, I'm not even going to get into that shit. But yeah. And listen, you know, for the, you know, a lot of people, you know, obviously, you know, we can joke about certain dynamics of things, but I'll use Sabrina's analogy. I joke a lot. So I'm not really going to fucking bite you unless you, like, kind of, like, run up on me and, like, try and stick your finger in my ass or something so invasive
Is that what
that I just don't have any other choice but to react badly. So you really don't have to worry about it. Again, one of my defense against the dark arts is comedy.
Yes.
Okay, I have found for many, many years since I was a young one that comedy, the energy, the magic of laughter and humor is incredibly powerful. It can overwrite, it can shift dynamics, it can deflect, it can heal. And like all different types of energies, the context is how you use it. So you can use it in a variety of different situations, obviously based on the little details. But comedy, laughter, these dynamics are free. They're really just from within us. And it is an incredible defense against those darker arts, those darker elements.
Laughter can change the entire set of the mood, and it can give you a great, like the dark humor. We love dark humor around here. Dark humor can give a great outlet for those negative emotions and transform them into something positive. I think it's amazing.
Listen, sometimes it's incredibly difficult to really put any other type of spin on something besides to just take it and be like, well, it's a big steaming pile of shit. Let's at least make a sandwich out of it.
Yep.
As horrible as that is, it is still just a little bit better than the initial steaming pile of shit. You know, you can throw some tomatoes on it. You know, Shiya, I know she loves her dill, so you sprinkle some dill, some salt and pepper. You get it on some good artesian bread. You know what I mean? With maybe some good, like, you know, kettle chips. And then all of a sudden, that pile of shit isn't as bad. Now, when you bite into it, it's still gonna be shit. But at least all these other, but listen, all these other dynamics now have at least lessened the horror, as they say. Now, granted, there are cases where humor's not appropriate. You know what I mean? And I hate to say it, you know, sometimes we err in that dynamic. Like, you don't want to show up at, you know, somebody's funeral for their, you know, 5-year-old child and then start cracking out dead kid jokes. It's not going to go over, you know what I mean? No. Granted, it might be your coping mechanism, but you're not going to make any friends, and you're probably not going to really do anything more than pacify yourself. Now, my philosophy on this is just keep that shit in your head. Just don't open your fucking mouth. Because you can play all types of horrible comedic type of element in your mind, and nobody else has to fucking know, okay? So yeah, you could take a scenario knowing that, well, if I open my fucking mouth, this isn't gonna go well. But you can run that shit animated in 3D, surround sound, Dolby.
Oh, you can have all kinds of things going on in your head.
For you, in the moment, it might, again, deflect or, if nothing else, help rewrite whatever's going on in the moment. Now, it does take some practice, you know, as empaths, especially high-functioning empaths. We tend to react based on the emotional context. So one of the other most practical, I think, defenses against the dark elements is learning how to separate the emotional context. And again, not always easy in practical application. Sounds great. The words sound great. Oh, right, but putting it into motion, depending upon the situation, can be incredibly problematic. Now, like riding a bike, like learning a new language, like any number of things, we have to condition ourselves. Yeah. Conditioning works both ways. As we can become conditioned in negative elements, we can condition ourselves within positive dynamics to live within certain frameworks of things. You repeat things, and it becomes not only easier, but we become better at it. We understand it. It becomes ingrained into us. So that way, instead of having to take the time to think about it, it becomes, as they say, instinctual to certain degrees.
Much like muscle memory.
Muscle memory is a great analogy. Now, none of this is 100% perfect. Okay? That is also part of that dynamic in understanding that we can only control so much. We can control our actions to certain degrees, but sometimes things are meant to play out in ways. So understanding, and you, Shiya, talk a lot about this within the framework of darkness. And it's a paradox, because nobody wants to go through bullshit. I don't think very many people, except if you're into like that German shit porn stuff, that actually get up in the morning and is like, how can I immerse myself in shit? Yeah, it doesn't usually play out that way.
Maybe Amber Heard.
But, well, yeah, if you're pulling an Amber Heard, okay, that's fair. But if we're going to be honest about it, these dynamics, sometimes we have to go through these shitty moments, these dark elements,
yes, indeed,
to learn other things, to actually connect certain dots, or if nothing else, they are the proverbial price that sometimes has to be paid to get from point A to point B. It's not always fair, it's not always right, it's definitely not fun, but in my experiences, humbly, the world tends to play out that way. So the more that we can, again, not only remove that emotional context, but recognize to the degree, despite our best efforts, certain things sometimes will play out the way the universe wants it to play out. Yep. And again, that's where removing the emotional context becomes so incredibly important, because as empaths, as emotional creatures, when things don't play out despite our best efforts, we tend to turn that back on ourselves. We internalize it in negative ways.
Very true.
And that really, again, is counterproductive. It's harmful. We ourselves, many times, are the problem. We are our own worst enemy. We create the dynamic. We give it energy. Every situation plays out differently, but those dynamics, when you put them into the equations, give us better defenses, allows us to be able to look at a situation and actually put it in its perspective for us. Doesn't always matter what other people think. Again, it is what it is sometimes, but you know what I mean? There is a case to be made that we have to deal with things as it applies to us. Now, that doesn't mean, that, you leave a bus full of burning children behind because, well, I don't want to be late for my nail appointment. Yeah, no, that shit doesn't fly. Context is important. So, whereas sometimes you can make the case, there are other times where, it's just going to go even worse if you do not approach it honestly and correctly. Now,
that's why I always talk about practicing the pause. Pause a second before you choose an action or a reaction.
Listen, it gives you the benefit of being able to not get caught in the the moment, the reactionary dynamic that a lot of times makes shit worse.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And there are a couple dynamics for some people here. You know what? And I'm going to do something because you have mentioned this. So I'm going to go down and
live chat.
No. Yes, there we go. Live chat. So that way other people can hopefully see this and interact, depending upon on the platform. Unfortunately, between YouTube and Facebook.
Now, the good news is, if you want to see all the comments, you can go to YouTube. On the YouTube, all the comments from all the channels are visible.
Okay. But not on
Facebook.
Yes. Just saying they haven't quite figured it all yet. So yeah, a couple of things I wanted to kind of touch on. Jonathan made a great point. He said he found a pretty strong spell for dealing with attackers when it's really someone else. He amped it up a bit though, and he's got that little evil horn thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah,
Jonathan's shirt, I curse rapists.
Listen, the old analogy, sometimes the best, defense is a strong offense.
Fuck yeah.
But it has to be, again, context. Always has to be context. Now, Shannon shared something, and Shannon says, I had to learn a hard lesson. I worked for a county office, saw him hand a check from the county to a politician, and went off at the clerk's office. He sent me a certified letter via the outburst. I posted the postage charge on social media, showing taxpayers he was using the public's money to send me a nasty gram. He had a heart attack after that. Yeah, well, again, and here is where I would step in, okay, and just say, you know what, that really isn't on you. Okay, we really don't have that kind of power to do those types of things. As much as we would like to believe it, and as much as magic has been enamored to certain degrees, and I say that, again, with the framework that nothing is 100%. So yes, there might be a case to some degree, but they're usually around other dynamics. In other words, unless you injected him with a poison, or you changed his medication, or you connected some electrodes to his testicles, and you were sharp. Yeah, those dynamics we don't control. Just because we feel anger, just because we're like, oh, fuck that motherfucker, he's a piece of shit, I hope he fucking dies. You know what? That doesn't mean it's our fucking fault.
No, you're just putting it out, and the universe chooses what to do with it or not.
Right. Now, again,
not on you.
Humbly, I would say we all need to be cognitive. Anger is definitely an incredibly damaging energy dynamic.
Yeah, and if you live in that negativity, you're going to bring the negativity on yourself.
But there is context for what is referred to some degree as righteous anger.
Yeah.
Anger is not in of itself, by its nature, a negative framework. However, when you frame it against humanity and how we tend to translate it, okay, yes, you know what I mean, then it becomes incredibly dangerous. Not unlike radiation, the longer you stay exposed to it, the more damage it will do.
True.
And, Elspeth said something really beautiful, and I want to share this, for anybody who didn't see it before it came up. And she says, my self-talk used to be when it would go bad. You could have handled that better. You're smarter than that. Why would you trigger someone like that? Sometimes those words try to creep back in, and she, has the ability, we have the ability to squash them. Again, certain things we become conditioned to. We respond particular ways for a variety of different reasons, but they're all reflective of the dynamic of conditioning, good or bad. And that application requires its own conditioning to, as Elspeth said, squash.
Yeah.
My sister Suzanne, we were talking about you before. Great to see you. And
those new dreads, Suzanne.
Jonathan talks a little bit about the context of his
spell.
And I'm not gonna do it over there, but it is a good segue because the number
Anybody
one
wants to
dynamic.
see it can go on
Right,
the
you
YouTube.
can go on the YouTube and you looked at it. But the first element in it is going to be one of the first dynamics that I'm going to talk about defense-wise. All right, is salt.
Number one tool in a witch's tool bag.
Yes, indeed. Now, salt. Just going to switch. I'm going to switch off the animation of the live chat for right now. So again, this is just again a generic one that I found. Salts in witchcraft. It talks about Himalayan pink salt, red salt, Celtic sea salt, table salt, black salt, which was the framework that Jonathan mentioned in his spell. But salt has always historically had an incredibly powerful framework within our lives, and this is through time. First and foremost, salt is a compound that is part of our biological system. Without salt, you would die. Pure and simple, okay? Now, beyond that, and way back in the day, salt was actually a precious commodity because of the difficulty of actually being able to collect it. So, use the analogy in Roman times, salt was actually used as a currency. You needed it to preserve meats. You know what I mean?
In a lot of cultures, if a guest came to your house to offer them protection under your roof, you would offer them bread and salt.
Correct. And salt as an element is really, again, associated with the cleansing. So, using the table salt, all around good cleansing properties. Salt is an easy dynamic. It's an easy, I guess you could say, element to manifest, to kind of reflect that dynamic. And it's something that, again, most of us have in our homes quite easily, or it's incredibly easy to access. And, simple little analogies, again, using, as they say, the old ways, it helps reinforce the most important dynamic in all of this is our manifestation, is our energy. Having that connection, even in just a simple element as, sprinkling some salt, on your doorstep every other day, creates the conditioning dynamic, creates now a framework, a conduit, if you will, for that energy. And salt, again, will carry the charge. So it's not just like you throwing it out there again and then just blowing up. You know what I mean? The salt actually...
It pulls negativity. One of the really cool things that you do for cleansing your crystals and stuff like that is placing them on top of a salt bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And the salt literally pulls negative energy out of your crystals. And then you take the salt and put it out, Now,
one of the other reflective dynamics, and I'll call this the flip side of the coin, is iron. And iron, like salt, has been used for thousands of years. It's a potent tool, not only in the practices of witchcraft, but in just human evolution. It's one of the most abundant metals on our planet, and it's a great metal for forging, for making it into tools, whatever that tool may or may not be. It's tough, hard, and with a high melting point, it makes it ideal, for situations that have to work under, extreme conditions. It's also one of only 3 ferromagnetic metals, along with nickel and cobalt, making it an essential part of magnets and compasses. Again, reflecting its ability to interact with another type of energy, which is magnetic. Now, there's an additional dynamic. In astrophysics, iron is incredibly important in the life cycle of stars. It's one of the most, atomically stable substances in the universe. It's also unique because it's the first element in the periodic table to require more energy to make than it gives out from atomic fusion. And the analogy being, because it's important, when a star gets older, it fuses hydrogen to make helium, helium to make beryllium, And all the rest, once it starts fusing atoms to make iron, the star begins to die. So iron is an element that signals the death of stars, and any element that weighs more than iron within an atomic context can only be made in supernovas. That is the explosion when a really big fucking star goes boom.
Yeah.
Now, correspondingly in biology, iron is one of the most important elements in not only mammalian, reptilian, and avian blood because it's the element that we use in the chemical hemoglobin. This is the chemical for us in our blood that basically binds to oxygen and allows us to live. Now you have crustaceans like lobsters. They don't use iron. They use copper and instead make I think what's called hemocyan, which makes their blood blue. But again, just like in stars, iron can mean death for humans as well. If we overdose on iron, we suffer from iron-heavy metal poisoning. When we get crushed by a heavy object, we can suffer a disease called traumatic rhabdomyolysis, I think it's called, or crush syndrome. And it's basically myoglobin, which is another iron-based compound in our muscles, which, again, enter our kidneys and it kills us. You know what I mean? Now, from a magic perspective, as they say, the witchy facts.
Yeah.
Iron's incredibly stable. Its stability, both from an atomic level and magically, makes it a pure magical conductor, which, also means that magic doesn't really seem to affect iron very much. The old lore has always been that enchantments on iron are never anywhere near as strong as other metals, and, trying to enchant something with iron is incredibly difficult. However, the flip side is that iron doesn't pick up negative elements from background sources. And, again, that's why you'll see things like altar tools for rituals and stuff made from iron.
Yep.
You'll keep them inside an iron or steel box, a box that's been nailed together with iron nails. Horseshoes being, a great analogy.
Horseshoes over the door.
Right. Now, again, that very nature makes iron protective.
Iron spike.
Right. And, the old lore is, negative spirits, faithful, can't touch iron lest it burn them and cause them pain. But that's also where, iron pendants and jewelries and stuff really came into play in the old world analogies because it would, by its very nature, be attracted and the pendant and would dispel it. So you'll see iron used in multiple cultures within, protective charms and
it also protects against ghosts because again it absorbs energy.
Right.
And so metaphysical energy, other kind of spirits, ghosts, whatever, iron does help protect against.
Now again, iron is cheap. You know what I mean? It's easy. It can be something as simple as an analogy, and I know people who will carry an old nail with them. They'll have a horseshoe in their house. Any number of analogies, any number of dynamics with iron, okay? And it has this twofold dynamic to it. One, you have the science, okay, of how incredibly important iron is in the structure of everything and how iron is a part of who we are. And since it's a part of who we are, it's a part of stars and it's a part of the planet, that gives us a connection. And that connection helps reinforce. It energizes the dynamic, again, of manifestation. So it allows us a very simple and practical tool to, again, work on that dynamic of conditioning or reconditioning, if you will, to create defenses against those dark arts. And again, it's not a right or wrong element. It is how it applies, how it translates to each and every one of us. So a simple analogy, and this is an old school one. An iron horseshoe over the door.
And a little bit of
salt at the mantle, or you know what I mean.
If you spill the salt, toss it over your shoulder.
Well, again, that's again a framework of the more superstitious, but again, it is the same analogy because it's based within a ritualistic dynamic. So if we believe it, we give it energy.
So I have a question for you on the horseshoe over the door.
Go for
There
it.
are two places of thought for a horseshoe over the door. You have the horseshoe with the opening facing upwards, so it looks like a U, and that is to hold the luck in. Then there's the pouring with an upside down U with the opening facing downwards to pour luck out through onto whoever walks through your doorway. Which line of thought are you?
I think it's really, again, based on whoever is manifesting.
But
because
if I handed you a horseshoe and said, here, hang this over your door, and didn't tell you how to do it, which way would you go? Would you go pour the luck out to people who pass, or keep the luck in and bless all who are in the house?
See, for me, again, I would not put a horseshoe up for luck. I would put the horseshoe up, again, as
a defensive element.
As a defensive element. And not, again, to block witches or fae or anything like that, but as a natural counter against negative energy, whatever form.
Which is exactly why there's selenite above all of our doorways.
Well, again, great analogy. Mm-hmm. There are so many different elements within lore, within literature, that many things get lost in the mix. You know what I mean? We, again, perceive things based on the conditioning, as I've mentioned a few times, because these are the stories that we were told. This is how it was reinforced. You know, any number, again, of analogies. So shifting that dynamic, again, sometimes is the key. But if it works for you, and especially if it works in a positive context, there's nothing wrong with taking a particular avenue on it. So if your context is more from the old Gallic dynamic, then you know what, so be it. Or if you take it from, you know, like an Armenian context, as Shannon mentions, that's okay too. It really is, and this is the secret, I guess, within the dynamic of spellcraft and magic, that, again, it is based on the person. Everything else is reflective of them. That's why certain things, especially within elements of like tarot and stuff like that, have become so, I guess you could say, well, they have been... They've been commercialized. They have been set into a framework as this is how... No, this is just how one person interpreted it, and then it got picked up, and then this person adopted it, and then it became accepted.
Well, now, the evil eye would be like a perfect example of that. That one is so culturally accepted across the board as being a protection against the dark arts that everybody sees that and immediately goes towards, oh, that's the evil eye protection. You know, and that people have imbued it with extra belief because of that.
To some degrees, yes.
So it does increase because of the collective belief.
But you can go someplace else within another framework of the world where there is no exposure into a particular cultural dynamic, and it will have no framework because there's nothing there to connect it. So that's why certain dynamics within, again, the lore, within traditions and rituals are very specific to those types of dynamics because they reflect the reinforced elements over time within cultural, within even to some degree societal dynamics. You know what I mean? And Elspeth, have a great night. You have to get up, and I hope everything goes good for you as well too. I know you've been fighting the fight as well, so much love and strength from all of us for you, and welcome Jessica. Sometimes, yes, the wolf can't speak. The wolf can't put that on my mouth.
Well, see, now we just talked about
look at that.
One of those humor moments for deflection.
Yeah, well, that, you know, again,
Perfect.
My brain
example.
runs faster than my mouth can actually keep up sometimes. So, like in my brain, I'm like, yes, Jessica Lynn Granodos. And then I'm just like, and that's how it comes out. So I got to dance back and forth. And, you know, in my mind,
Yeah,
it's like,
but you just did a perfect Jessica Rabbit on top of
well,
it. You know,
you know,
for
hey,
Roger Rabbit, it's Jessica.
you picked up on that.
Yes, I did, of course.
And listen, again, Shannon makes a great point. It's a tradition, so she sewed them in her son's clothes, and so does her sister. That's how these dynamics, especially, you know, just like recipes, are passed down.
Yes.
And that, in its purest form, is conditioning. We take these elements, we carry them forward, we pass them to our children and our children's children, and then they become reinforced over time. And obviously within the dynamics of, you know, what works. You know, if grandma's recipe for chicken soup tastes like shit, yeah, it isn't going to fly for long. But if, you know, grandma's recipe for chicken soup, you know, cures herpes, yeah, you can bet that everybody in the fucking family is going to be on grandma for some of that chicken fucking soup.
And that becomes its own magic.
And it is its own magic. And that gets into the dynamics within salt, because a lot of times the framework, and, you know, we're going to kind of dance into one of the other elements, cinnamon.
Cinnamon.
Cinnamon. Now, you know, again, cinnamon is incredibly old. It's powerful. It has a whole lot of different dynamics that can be applied. It's anti-inflammatory. It has some incredibly powerful elements that can help with a lot of different things within how our body processes and deals with, let's just call them toxins.
Yeah.
Okay. It's also incredibly powerful from a ritualistic element because, again, of its history.
The staple in my witch's cabinet.
Right. Now, there is, though, something that's incredibly important, and I picked cinnamon because this is where, again, time and, unfortunately, the effects of technology shift the dynamic. Not all cinnamon is created equal.
No.
Okay? The cassia, and that's Cassia, the cassia variety of cinnamon contains significant amounts of a compound called coumarin. Okay, and coumarin has been found to be harmful in large doses. Now, again, unfortunately, most, if not all, the cinnamon you're going to find in supermarkets is the cassia variety because it's cheaper to grow and process. However, you can get, and it's called Ceylon, and it's Ceylon, also referred to as true cinnamon. Okay, and it's much lower in the coumarin and stuff. But you would have to, you know, again, find that specifically. A lot of health places and specialty shops will carry it. It is a little bit more expensive, but in the dynamic of, again, what we can do, defense against the elements, is be more cognitive of what we put into our body.
It is also important to note that just because it says organic cinnamon doesn't mean it's the right type.
Right.
It could be organic of the most common, you know, cinnamon instead of the Ceylon.
Now, that doesn't mean that your regular cinnamon is worthless. It's just the context about how you're using it. So raw cinnamon sticks are still incredibly powerful from a ritualistic context.
Very much so.
They're great for cleansing. They're great for creating, again, that dynamic of atmosphere. And an atmosphere is an important dynamic of energy because atmosphere is reflective of an energy.
Cinnamon is one of the base elements for manifestation when you're using it magically. So literally, you know, somebody said they sprinkled it in their wallet. You know, yeah, you can manifest money that way. It's one of those things that I use in a lot of my manifestation spells. And it smells great while you're burning it too. It's a lovely toasty kind of smell, unique. but it's great in all kinds of different
And it's just, again,
base
it's
manifestation
an
element.
old world dynamic
Yes.
that has been, again, used in countless cultures all over the place for a long time. So again, just little dynamics. Brother Gary, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you got to be off as well. You're moving tomorrow, so
Yay!
Congrats on that. I hope that goes great for you. And I know you got to be up early tomorrow, but I'm sure we'll see you too. Amy,
Hey,
welcome. Or
that's Melissa.
That's Melissa. Hello, Melissa. Empower me with your name. This
Melissa.
is Melissa.
Trumbo.
I'm being facetious, but I can't always keep, this is the dynamic that's challenging for me as a wolf. You know what I mean? Because I can't smell you all. If I could just smell you all, I'd be able to identify you. I don't have that luxury. So sometimes I see these YouTube names or Facebook names and, my brain says, this.
It takes a while for the witch to remember them.
Yes. Yeah.
But I've known Melissa for years and years, so if I forget her, then, well, check me out for Alzheimer's. Just saying.
So we're going to come back in a couple of minutes. One of the things I wanted to do, and one of the things that I always do within this podcast, is I like to reflect on certain dynamics, both musically and from whatever particular, element that happens to strike my fancy in the moment, or something that's pissed me off, or any number of analogies. But there is a case to be made about maintaining the connection to the past. So with this upcoming show, and again, I'm going to throw that back up there live. There we go. With that show coming up September 17th, one of the things the Under My Skin for Life Foundation has done for a number of years has been involved in many different charity types of projects. And one of those projects, back in the day, that myself, my son, Tony, and the early incarnation of Broken Past, was an event called Rock Against Dystrophy. And by a guy by the name of John Chasky, we call him Turbo. Turbo. But basically, it had been a charity rock show to raise money and awareness for, again, dystrophy. You know what I mean? Muscular dystrophy. So we were privileged to play that show a couple of different years. And like a lot of things, we forget, certain things get lost. Some moments, unfortunately, we don't always have the ability to capture. But today I came across an actual video from the show with us performing one of the songs that we'd written together called Dead to Me. And again, for me, not only as a musician, but as a father, performing with those guys, with my son, was incredibly powerful. It helped me in many ways. And even though, obviously there was a price to pay for some of it, I still got more out of it, you know what I mean, than I put in, and I can say that humbly and honestly now. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to play a live track recording from the Rock Against Dystrophy show, okay, from, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, okay, and it was from a little rock club up in North Jersey called Dingbats.
That's a fun name.
Yes, it is a kind of iconic rock club, kind of like the Stone Pony is. But anyway, we were privileged to play the show. So we're going to take a quick break, and we are going to pop with that, and then we'll be back to talk a little bit more. Yeah, a little blast from the past, broken past. Dead to Me, Rock Against Dystrophy, Dingbats. And one of the great things, again, you want to talk about Defense Against the Dark Arts, is the dynamics of the people that we choose, and I say that again, that we choose to have around us.
Yep.
Sometimes we can't control it, but we can, for the most part, choose the people that we choose to interact with. Redundant, I know. Paradox, yes.
Family that we choose.
Well, family, friends, again.
There are friends that become family.
Friends that definitely become family. Listen, there are people in my life that are closer to me that don't have a blood relation than, dynamics of people who are my blood. And that's not to put anybody down or say anybody's less than. This is how it works. It is the dynamic of the human experience. But those dynamics also create energy. And one of the things, again, in that memory, in that show, was not only did I have my son up there performing with me, but Tony had his son, and that was the little guy on the stage, Tony's son, Ray. So we made it a point within the dynamic of what we did to incorporate our kids as best as we could.
It's a beautiful thing.
The events and the shows that we do, weren't about making money for ourselves. They were about, raising money for muscular dystrophy. They are, as, with the Arts for Autism, to raise money and awareness for autism.
Cause, yes.
And it's a free event. Excuse me. Everybody that's performing is performing of their own time, of their own dollars, as they say. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are going to be things that you can buy. We want you to buy stuff, obviously, that, raises money and
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Goes back to the cause and stuff. But the foundation, the Under My Skin for Life Foundation, is a 501c3. They are a non-profit organization. Myself and my son have been members now for going on 8 years. Tony's had the foundation running, I think, now for 13 years. He started it. He's the head of the foundation. But it was a dynamic that we shared together. And again, I can talk about this because I was there.
You were there.
Tony and I were hanging out at his tattoo shop one day with our mutual brother, Chris Miller, who jumps in and out around here. And he'll be at the autism event, as will brother Jonathan. Hey, listen. I've mentioned this before, it's a great point to remember. We're auctioning Jonathan off at the auction, okay? So all you single ladies out there, or you bi-curious men, or just not sure how you identify, you can get yourself a piece of the Phoenix, okay? If the price is right, okay? And he's just a great guy. I mean, he's willing to literally put his ass out there.
He's house
for
trained.
autism.
He's house trained.
Yeah, well, that's what they say.
That's
now, again, this is going to be like any other used car deal. It's going to say right in the contract, as is. I'm not taking any fucking responsibility on any of that dynamic.
You piss the Phoenix off, he might just...
That's between you and the Phoenix, okay? Right. But as any good pimp will tell you, bitch, go make me some money. Love you, brother. I see, that's comedy. Granted, not everybody's. I'm sure there's a pimp out there that'd be like, wow, why are you talking shit about me like that? Or somebody who's on the other end, oh, you're exploiting that poor young man. You're objectifying him sexually. You're implying these heretical, homosexual, oh my God. Buffy, we must flee. That's just me. I'm obscene.
Now, a good segue from having played that wonderful track is music is a really great defense against.
Yes, the witch jumps ahead of me.
Bad
just like but no, that's good. That's great. Well, listen,
I'm in your head.
I know.
I live there.
Oh God, there's not enough room. But hey, but you entertain my cast of characters. Granted,
I am entertained.
Sometimes it's not unlike a bad day at Pornhub, but hey, it is what it is.
Hey, I can always revert to Amber humor.
Oh God. No. But yes, music, just like humor, laughter, is incredibly powerful. It is raw. It really transcends dynamics of language. Mm-hmm. It transcends dynamics of cultural aspects. It really, again, is so dynamic that it can bring people together in ways that, there are no other ways to get people together.
Yeah.
You get a good beat with some good music. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on sexually, religiously, politically, any of those dynamics. Everybody's just having a good fucking time. And that energy is contagious. Okay? It can be spread. Not unlike an STD.
But a good STD.
But a good STD.
Is it?
Yes, if there is such a thing. But yes, again, all joking aside, it's powerful. And whereas there's not always, AKA, we're not always walking around with a sound system that we can, in any particular dynamic, just cue in a particular element, that for whatever reason speaks to us, and all of a sudden, oh shit.
Let there be music.
What's going on? Yes. See, I have an internal soundtrack. And that internal soundtrack is happening right now. Oh, yeah. Oh, helter skelter, baby.
So everybody else gets in the wolf's mind right now.
Well, that's part of what this is about is, hey, welcome to the maze. But music can be an internal dialogue, just like humor and comedy. You don't have to necessarily have it playing there. You can have it playing in your head, and you can use that, again, as a defense. So, if stuff starts getting weird, you just queue up, your fucking Power Rangers theme. You know what I mean? And then go, go, Power Rangers. And all of a sudden now you're jazzed up. Or, maybe you're old school and you want to go into something deep and inspirational like O Cortana. Whoa! Yes.
I like People Are Strange. I play that one an awful
lot. Brother Jim. Yes.
Yes.
But it's not right or wrong. It's a dynamic that's unique and personal to the individual. So I highly recommend, and I teach it, develop an internal soundtrack.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, if you've got the ability to, carry around some portable JVC type shit where, all of a sudden in a moment you can just click a button and just be like, rock on, go for it. Okay? Make it a show, all the better. Yep. Because that'll just give it more energy. But again, we don't always have that luxury or that opportunity. So the internal dialogue, the internal soundtrack, is just as powerful and much easier, obviously, to cue up in a given moment. Now, and I've said this throughout the evening, this requires practice. It is a framework of conditioning. So you have to, again, manifest it. You have to create the playlist. Okay, these things reflect certain dynamics, and we all relate to things differently. For Shiya, People Are Strange by The Doors. For me, it's Helter Skelter. And that reflects a dynamic that's unique to you. So you build that playlist. And, sometimes it's this song or sometimes it's that song. But they become reflective now of that unique connection that we all have into the energies that are around us. Sometimes, just like a radio station, we have to tune into it. Okay? We just have to pinpoint where it is we need to be, or subsequently where we want to be, and cue it up. Tap into it. It doesn't change, obviously, physical reality. So, again, if you get a flat tire, just because you cue up the Power Rangers theme doesn't mean you're going to transform into a fucking superhero and be able to lift your car. Doesn't work that way.
But you might feel very...
But you may not be as inclined toward rage. You may not feel as shitty. And then, again, the correlating dynamic is it doesn't carry over into other aspects. Because that is, a lot of times, really where the greater damage is done, when it compounds, when it escalates, when it carries over into things. I've talked about this a few times, and I think it's a fair analogy. Toward the last year that I was working a corporate job, the dynamics of the negative energy I would bring home with me, despite my best efforts, despite my internal soundtrack, despite my deflection with, dark humor and sarcasm. It's not a perfect mechanism. And we all have our moments where, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out the way that we wanted to. But we still, again, now have that dynamic that we take home with us, and then it carries over into other things. It can carry over into our interactions with our loved ones, our children. It can carry over into our interactions with people we don't even know. It can also become reflective of internal dynamics where we will spin, we will replay, we will seep and marinate in anger, in anxiety, in all these other dark art elements, as we'll call them. And they now grow and they compound. We feed them, they grow larger, and they grow hungrier. And that set of variables will change sometimes in every moment, but they also, too, can and will be reflective of their own conditioning elements. And I said this earlier tonight. A lot of times we're the fucking problem. It's not what's going on around us. It's how we are processing it. It's what we are doing or not doing within the dynamic of the moment, of the situation. And a lot of times they are also reflective of that conditioning. We become used to reacting in particular ways. And once those patterns are repeated, they become instinctual. So if you work in a dynamic like my brother Jonathan, where you deal with a lot of fucking stupid people, you start to believe and you become conditioned to the fact that fucking humanity sucks and people suck. And then that'll start to translate into how you interact with all people. Now, I'm not saying that's the case for Jonathan, but I know from our conversations that he has struggled with that, as I have struggled with that, as Shiya has struggled with that. It's every high-functioning empath that I've ever encountered has had to deal with that dynamic, is that unfortunately, the world is filled with shitty and stupid people. And when you're exposed to them on a regular basis, it tends to polarize. It tends to, again, there's this magic word, condition us in how we react. And then those reactions become reflective of other dynamics. We tend to become less tolerant. We become less compassionate. Our empathy now starts to reflect a darker aspect. And eventually, and I say this with all the caveats of pay attention to this moment, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when that dynamic starts internalizing upon us. It is best analogy that I can use, a cancer that will grow, it will consume, and it will kill and destroy everything that it comes into contact with as it progresses. This is the doorway into the deeper darknesses, the depressions, the bad behaviors, the destructive behaviors, all these different dark, deeper elements are all symptomatic of something else from where they start. Okay? I use the analogy a lot with racism. People are not born racist. It's a learned behavior. It is taught. It is conditioned into people based on a number of different variables, most of them being social or cultural.
Yeah.
But again, in no uncertain terms, it is not something that exists in the ether.
People aren't born racist.
Okay, it is passed, it is conditioned, it is taught. So it is reinforced within different dynamics, and then it becomes something else. The seed is now planted, and depending upon the person and how they choose to live, that dynamic will grow or it will not. But it is within what we choose to do, aka our personal responsibility in our behaviors, in our actions, that will determine it. You know, with a Native American lore, there's an old saying, and it's a very simple reflective. There are two wolves that live within each of us. One is angry and represents the darkness, and one is loving and represents the light. And the dynamics of which wolf within us will be in play in any given moment is depending upon which wolf we choose to feed.
Yep.
So if you feed the anger, if you feed the negativity, that will be the predominant, dominant aspect in play. So again, it's our best defense to try, to the best of our ability, to understand not only what's in play, but why is it in play? Because again, We're not born this way. So there's a dynamic somewhere along the line. There's something, there's a trigger, there's a catalyst, there's a moment. Maybe it's a series of moments, but there's always a point that it can be drawn back to. Now, it's not always easy, especially when you talk about conditioning dynamics that we experience as children. We don't always have that cognitive memory, that connection to understand where exactly did this happen. So it does sometimes become more difficult to actually narrow it down.
That's why it's good to do shadow work with others.
Well, thank you. Why don't you talk about that for a moment? Because I know that's something that's
something we do a lot on a mentorship circle.
Ah, yes. Thank you for segue into that.
Yeah, that is my teaching group. It's $25 a month, but one of the biggest things that we do on there is work our shadow work together. We do weekly journaling. We talk about the issues together. But when you're trying to frame out, okay, what got me to this particular point in my life to where, well, the old phrase of, you take two brothers. One is an alcoholic. One is a teetotaler. No, completely clean and sober. And you ask them both, why are you an alcoholic? Or why are you so adamant against alcohol between the two brothers? And they both give the same answer. Because my father was an alcoholic. They had that cognitive choice point to choose which direction they want to go down. Well, when you're talking about looking back and trying to identify what got us to that point, sometimes we need that outside perspective, because it's not so easy to draw the line of, well, I'm this way because, I chose to buy into my parental conditioning, or I chose to directly oppose it. Sometimes it's like, oh shit, I never realized that I was doing this because of one thing that one person said. And you need somebody else's perspective, fresh eyes, to come in and say, hey, have you thought about this? Or how do I handle this negative behavior? Well, have you thought about trying to counter it with that?
And there's also the dynamic, and I mentioned this at the beginning, and it's, again, a common theme that will reoccur within the dynamic is, as humans, as empathic creatures, we become emotionally compromised.
Yes.
And that emotional dynamic prevents us many times from being able to see the dynamic that we need to see, or we need to understand. So, as you mentioned, having that outside perspective, having the dynamic of somebody who is not emotionally compromised by it, gives us a more accurate and more honest interpretation or perspective, you know what I mean? Because ultimately we choose to embrace certain things, or we choose not, for whatever the reasons.
I love the way you put it one time. It's like, you know what? It's our fucked up perspectives that got us traumatized in the first place. Sometimes we need a new perspective to undo the trauma.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's something that's taught in pretty much all the different aspects of recovery, be it AA or NA or any other type of, that internal dynamic is that we tend to be our own worst enemies. It's our shitty thinking that got us into trouble in the first place.
Yep.
That's the dynamic that we need to let go of. And that is also reflective of ego.
And emotional compromisation.
Well, ego is one of the symptomatic elements within the emotional spectrum, within the dynamic of, this is what I feel, therefore this is what it is. And it's not a black and white dynamic, but the paradox of it is we still feel the way that we do, right or wrong, good or bad, indifferent or otherwise. And Shannon says she hates being an empath sometimes. Yeah.
Don't we all sometimes?
This is the curse and the blessing of the high-functioning empath, is that it does cut both ways.
Yes.
Now, Shannon was again mentioning, she's struggling how to phrase a post because the thing that's bogging her down is someone who passed tragically. And sometimes there is no way around it. I always tend to, and this is what I find is the lesser of the two evils. If you're framed within honesty. Even if you're wrong, you've done it within the right context. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, anything less than honesty is just adding additional bullshit into the mix. Painful or not, you know what I mean? It is a simple truth that at least within honesty, okay, and here is the simple analogy. At least with honesty, you have a framework for change.
Yes.
To make something different. Without honesty, you're chasing smoke and mirrors. You're chasing a ghost. It's not real. And by its very definition, by its very nature, there's no way out of that maze. That paradox will not resolve itself because you're not dealing with something real. And something real has no solution. Okay? It will continually alter based on the driving dynamic, just like a dog chasing its tail. It never ends. It's an infinite cycle.
That brings up another good defense against the dark arts is sometimes just being able to honestly express even negative emotions.
Yes, thank you very much. See, it's like you're in my head.
It's
you know,
like I'm in your head.
Did you make a reservation? I don't remember. I know you didn't pay.
We're soulmates, so.
I mean, that bill's coming due real soon. All right, I'm just saying.
Oh, dear.
All right. We didn't have a contract. Not yet.
I'm pretty sure there was a soul contract in there somewhere.
Oh, that's what those marks. That's what the marks in my flesh are.
Yeah, that you know.
I'm just a walking book of blood, and anybody who knows that particular context gets some points to you.
You woke up that one day and said, "What the hell is this?" Oh, don't worry about it. Okay, now you know.
Listen again.
Yeah.
The experiences we go through are unique. Okay, they're not always easily dealt with, and they're surely not always easily explainable, but there are a lot of base frameworks that we can use that are easily and readily available to us, even in the simplest analogy of using iron and salt, or cinnamon, or music, or laughter.
Or expression.
But expression, again, is one of those double-edged swords, because most people don't want to hear what's going on, and they surely don't want to hear anything that's emotionally charged.
Context.
Context being what it is, right. So,
the right people.
And there is a lot societally and culturally within the dynamic that we are conditioned not to speak honestly about how we feel. This isn't politically correct. This isn't stuff that we talk about at the dinner table. You know what I mean? There's 1,001 different fucking analogies, and we're conditioned, taught. Oh, don't talk about that. Don't
talk about religion.
Oh, why are you being so emotional? Listen, sometimes we can't help it. We can't control it. But a defense, I would again humbly submit, is recognizing that sometimes it's not in our best interest to just dump it out. Because when you put it out there, it now, again, can be, and sometimes very much is, and I'm sure a lot of you experience it, it can be used against you. It can be taken now and manipulated. It can be framed and amplified. So whereas, yes, sometimes you can make a context that you want to vocalize it, but knowing the dynamic of where you should vocalize it versus where you shouldn't. And again, it's not a black and white dynamic, but I have experienced personally, and I've seen too many times with many people, that being honest, vocalizing how they actually feel, has made the situation fucking worse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there itself lies a paradox. Well, I'm being fucking honest. Why is this going sideways? Because it isn't always just about us. It's the dynamics of how it carries over. What else is in play? Who else is involved? Where am I? When am I? Again, all these little variables make a difference. And it goes back to the importance of not only learning and understanding, but getting those outside perspectives. using the analogy of your mentorship circle, which is why I believe it is as powerful as it is, and it does the things that it does, because it creates an open framework, a safe place to vocalize,
not
to share, to dump, to scream, to laugh, whatever the fuck the case may be.
Yep.
And, there is a case to be made that, just like in comedy, timing is important. You know what I mean? So it isn't to say that, again, with your partner, say that you don't want to be honest with them, but knowing the timing and how and when.
Or if you need to talk about issues with the partner,
right, it's incredibly important to be able to do it in a framework that actually is conducive.
Safe, caring, loving.
Right. It's the same analogy. You're not going to take your clothes outside and dry them on the line in the rain. It's counterproductive. It's fucking raining. You have to wait until it stops raining to take your clothes and put them on the clothesline, if that's how you do things. Okay? It's the same analogy of thinking that you're going to get into a car with an empty gas tank and you're going to drive anywhere. No, you have to put gas in the tank first. Okay? Again, 1,001 different analogies within the everyday practical world that says these variables matter. They change the dynamic of how things will now play out. And Tiffany, thanks for joining us. You're right. Talking things through helps everyone, but it's also that environmental factor that's incredibly important. If you're trying to talk about things within a framework of people who say don't understand, who maybe have ulterior motives, or are simply, let's just call it, not intelligent enough or empathic enough to do anything more than make the situation fucking worse, then guess what? Talking about it is not the right idea. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't find it. And that's where, again, sometimes it gets a little bit tricky. And part of the reason, again, not to be redundant, why we do many of the things that we do is because if we don't take care of each other, who the fuck is going to do it? Strength in numbers. You know what I mean? So sometimes the best defense against the dark arts are really those people that we have around us, to whatever degree. You know what I mean? Again, use this analogy. We don't get to hang out with all of you on a physical context, but we can still interact this way. We can transfer our energy. We can share our laughter, our hope, our strength, our fears, our anger, and we can together learn. We can change the dynamics of things. We can heal, we can grow, or if nothing else, sometimes listen. Sometimes it's just about treading water from the moment to the moment, getting from point A to point B. Not everything plays out in the way that we want it. And especially if you look at a dynamic of healing, healing is not something that is constrained by any set parameters. You could take two people and break, the left index finger on both of them, and depending upon 1,001 different variables, they will heal differently over a different time period. And it has nothing to do with the dynamic of the healing. It is the dynamic of the individual.
The variables.
The variables, the little things, the details, as they say. So, again, that ever-shifting dynamic is real. It's not always visible. Again, it's like radiation. You're not going to see it. But we use radiation in nuclear reactors to create electricity to keep people's ice frozen. But radiation can also fuck you up and kill you. So, again, practical application suggests that anything in the wrong context can be a negative. And that defense against that is knowledge, is understanding. Now, the process, I'm not going to lie to you, never ends. There is no magical goal line that says, hey, you've made it. Let's show them what they want. Yeah, no, it doesn't play out that way. But what I can say, in all sincerity, it makes it better. It makes dynamics of things in everyday life a little bit easier. It gives you strength. It gives you courage. It gives you hope. And if I dare say it, faith. Faith in something better. Something, again, outside of the chaos and the anarchy and the shitty elements that, again, we all know are out there. We're not going to magically make them go away, but we can better defend ourselves. We can better protect ourselves. And by that very analogy, we can protect the people around us. One of the final dynamics that I'll talk about, and again, I was using the earlier analogy, these aspects, these energies are transmittable. I'll use the analogy personally for myself as a parent, the dynamics of what I put out there to my son directly impacted and reflected upon him. Okay? There's no other way around it. This is how we learn. This is how we develop as a species, is that we reflect what we see from the people around us. And 99 times out of 100 within this dynamic, it is the parent with the child. So as a parent, I had to learn the hard way, in some aspects, about how these things, even though they were unique to me, they still had an impact on my son. Okay? And I had to learn how to adapt to those dynamics. There is, unfortunately, a case sometimes where we have to eat it. We have to take the high ground for the greater good. And it goes back to the earlier statement that sometimes bad things happen for reasons, and even though we don't like them, they still set the stage for other things. It's how we learn, it's how we grow, we become stronger. We've used the analogy, and I'll continue to use this analogy of a sword being, forged in fire and beaten and folded and reheated, and this just incredibly extreme dynamic process, using the analogy of iron, you know what I mean, and how steel was created. These dynamics are universal in that when we can see them for what they are, when we can open ourselves to these dynamics, not just for ourselves, but in the dynamics for our children, for the people around us, especially the people that we care about, we now have more tools. Again, not only for the defense, but as I said before, sometimes the best defense is a strong offense.
Yeah.
Sometimes the case is not just about how we protect ourselves, how we defend ourselves, but how we take those additional steps to set the stage, to plant the garden, the canvas, the background. Again, there are a whole bunch of different words and, analogies that equally apply depending upon, situation. But they all come back to the dynamics of what we open ourselves to. You don't have to agree with all of it, and there's never going to be a case scenario where all of it's going to apply from any moment to the next. And I like to be redundant. Take what you need. Leave the rest behind. You can come back to it. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to necessarily fit just because this person said, well, that's how it works. No, not necessarily. But don't just assume. Don't just go from the emotional context. The emotional context is important, don't get me wrong. Feel what you feel. But everything else after that now becomes the dynamic of choice. What do we do? How do we do it? Why do we do it? And when you have these other defenses, these other tools, you have more options, you have better options. So we can avoid some of the more problematic patterns. You know, when people talk, and again, I'll use another analogy, you know, certain things we tend to repeat. Why do I always have such shitty taste in men? Well, 1,001 different analogies, but guess what? If there's a pattern there, it can be identified. It requires honesty, as mentioned, but sometimes it also requires somebody else's perspective who maybe isn't emotionally compromised. Maybe it's a dynamic that we're afraid to deal with. Maybe we're angry. Maybe we've repressed it. Maybe. There's a lot, again, different variables in play, but if that process isn't started, it will, by its very nature, control us. And not unlike a raging river, you will just get dragged downstream with it, and whatever the fuck happens will happen, and you will have no control. It's another analogy I hear people talk about all the time. Fucking shit's out of control. I can't. No, it's not that you can't control it. You just don't know how to control it.
Yeah.
Okay? And sometimes it isn't even necessarily about control. Sometimes it's about acceptance. Sometimes, as the analogy says, the glass is half full, not half empty. We choose to frame things with particular dynamics of energy. We take a negative context, which you can equally and just as easily, with practice and time, take that negative dynamic and reshape it as something less fucked up. Again, it's not going to make a shit sandwich into a steak, but it can make it a little bit easier to swallow. And it can make it so that way, and here's where it really comes into play, that it doesn't carry over into other things. Toxins, poisons, whatever word you want to use, they tend to carry over. They have collateral damage, side effects. Okay? And these many times can be more damaging, more dangerous than the initial trigger, the initial element. Shannon says, I usually am not depressed. I am always happy, usually. I feel like I am a walking dead person for no reason. I actually removed all the firearms from my home because this isn't me. I'm doing some Reiki tomorrow. I'm being super cautious of my mental health. Well, thank you for sharing that. And listen, that is very powerful and reflective of that dynamic of sometimes we just need to be honest. Sometimes the dynamics around us drain us, leave us feel, as you say, like a walking dead person for no apparent reason. And then this becomes now a trigger in the dynamic. Sometimes it's reflective of our mental health, but sometimes it's reflective also of our physical health. I dare say that our mental health many times is wrapped into our emotional health, because our mental health tends to, again, reflect from the very nature of the empathy dynamic, aka how we feel. So if you feel a particular way, that dynamic, that energy now will carry over into other things. And not unlike the moon passing across the sun, it will block the light. The sun is still there, but because of where you're at in the moment, it's now blocked. And then now it becomes dark.
And that's
And
why,
that darkness now carries over and reflects on other things.
and both of you, Shauna and Shannon, both of y'all are in the mentorship circle, and that's why we encourage you to bring those dynamics and express them there, because sometimes in expressing it, not only does it help lighten the load for you, but others can give you maybe a different perspective on
Sometimes.
how to.
But it's also part of what we do
Maybe
the
work with
podcast
it.
for. So that way, people also have a place where they can talk about this and not feel like they're going to be judged, that they're going to be thought less of, oh, Shannon, blah, blah. No, no, no. This is, again, the very core element of strength in numbers. You're not alone in this. You don't have to be alone in this. And just because, these people over there don't understand or don't care, that's not the whole world. That's not all of us. So sometimes that process is just, again, a journey of finding who works. Welcome, Shauna, my sister. It's great to see you. And she says it quite well. We're sometimes at a spiritual war, within the dynamics of what is right, what is wrong, And sometimes it's simple moments of things, and sometimes it's larger, deeper encompassing elements of family, generational dynamics. And listen, again, the hardest thing in a lot of this, and most of this, is that dynamic of being able to talk about it, to be able to vocalize it, and not just react and do things behind it, and it's a process, you know what I mean? As Shannon says, she's trying to be super responsible until she is herself again. Sometimes the problem, and again, not saying this specifically to you, but maybe part of the dynamic is not so much who you are, but who we really want to be, who we need to be, who we should be. Because again, and I've experienced this personally, and I'll just throw it out there for what it is, when we're in these places, we tend to create really dark, shitty versions of ourselves. We spin in things like guilt and remorse. We just judge ourselves against these ridiculous standards and stereotypes. We, again, kind of drown within any number of aspects of loneliness or betrayal, fear, again, whatever the particular piece of shit that's, driving it. It all comes back to the same thing. It now becomes reflective internally. Again, that's what high-functioning empaths are always great at, is that we internalize things to such degrees that we tend to fuck ourselves far worse than anybody else ever really could. But because they're usually, again, conditioned triggers from other people's behavior, we don't recognize and understand how we have adopted. We have now taken this energy and reinforced it internally. You know what I mean? It's the analogy, you know what I mean? You tell somebody that they're fat enough times with enough, pain and hurt and yeah, whatever, adjective dynamic you want to put into it, that person will believe it. They will, regardless if they're 38 pounds soaking wet, they will believe that they are fat. Yeah. This is how curses work. Now, Shiya and I disagree a little bit to some degrees about the nature.
I believe it in an extended version.
But my belief, my experience, that it's psychological, that the power of a curse is manipulating the emotional dynamic psychologically within a person's fear, within a person's anxiety, within a person's belief system. And it is, by its very nature, fueled by us embracing the dynamic, giving it life. As we manifest good things, we also manifest incredibly dark, ugly, shit. And they are as equally as powerful because we are giving it life.
Otherwise known as self-sabotage.
Self-sabotage is a great word for it. Now, that doesn't mean that your motive was, well, I just want to make myself into a monster. One out of every 150,000 maybe, but for the majority, they have just, again, here's that word again, they've been conditioned. They have gone through any number of horrible experiences, traumas, all types of damaging experiences that are now framed within emotional dynamics that are stretched out over sometimes short periods of time or long periods of times, but the resulting side effects, if you will, are still the same. The damage is done. And just how that damage translates from person to person is just the same analogy of us being unique.
Yeah.
Pain is still pain. Loneliness, fear, rage, anger, despair. You know, the package will vary. Yours will be in a blue box. Mine will have clowns on it. You know what I mean? That's just... But it's the same piece of shit inside the box. You know what I mean? And maybe your shit is brown and maybe mine is more of a golden color with little corn nuggets in it. And,
Ew.
you know what I mean? And
Okay.
Happy Time Care Bears singing, dancing. We love the shit. We love to play in the shit. That's just me. But in just that little moment, you can take a dynamic and you can make it into some fucking ridiculously comedic, even if it's a dark comedic element, like a bunch of Care Bears dancing in a giant pile of shit. It's just not as bad as shit. At least there are Care Bears involved. Now, those Care Bears may be fucking each other in the shit. I'm just saying, my mind has a weird way of just taking a dynamic and saying, well, I got Care Bears in here, but maybe that isn't enough to fight the darkness. So maybe those Care Bears should all be dressed like clowns, and maybe they should all be fucking each other. But they're asexual, so they're not really fucking each other because there's nothing to fuck each other. They're dry humping each other.
In shit.
In shit. You know what I mean? And, you know, maybe there'll be a Yankees baseball game going on in the background. You know what I mean?
Where the Yankees are getting beat by the Rangers?
Maybe Eminem will, you know, be doing, you know, an 8 Mile rap show. And, you know, Donald Trump will be selling, you know, state secrets out the back door. These things happen. You know what I mean? Who knows? But you can take those dynamics and you can spin them any number of ways, however you want. It's like recipes. You know what I mean? Try and just throw some shit together, see how it works. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. The only way you'll find out is to try. Experiment. Again, there's not necessarily right or wrong. Again, unless, you know, and I'll just use a counterpoint analogy. You know what I mean? Just because somebody pisses you off doesn't mean you get to pull out a fucking barbed wire wrapped baseball bat and go fucking full Negan on them. You can imagine that shit in your head. You just can't act out on it. Well, not unless you want to, you know, spend the rest of your life in a penitentiary with, you know, some not so friendly father rapers and shit like that.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Dark.
But that's me. I can take that element and, you know, I use the George Carlin, you know, philosophy of, well, fuck it. You know what I mean? It's fucked up anyway, so let's just make it my version of fucked up.
AKA as fucked up as it can be.
As fucked up as you can be. Good timing, Monkey. So tell us about, give us an example of that's fucked up to you. Just random. Pull it off the top of your head. Just pull out a random monkey. That's fucked up. Yes. Caught him on the moment. He's like,
There's so many brands.
There's so many. Well, just pick a particular brand.
So many brands and genres. I don't know.
Yes, pick one. Any one particular one. We're going to close out the night with, you know, monkey's fucked upness. That's fucked up, according to the monkey. Go ahead, pull one out. It could be anything. It could be random. It could be musical. It could be like, you know, they fucked up a show of yours. It could be like that guy who, you know,
You know, you're more likely to get killed by a cow or a horse than you are by a shark.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
That's fucked up.
That's fucked up. See, there you go. That was easy, wasn't it?
Don't stand behind them
Well, okay, well. Again.
Why don't you stand behind them?
because they kick.
Because they fucking kick your
And
ass.
if they kick you in the side of your head, that's lights out. That's better than Mike Tyson's punch.
Hey, they won't even bite your ear.
How did Mike Tyson get in this? Listen again.
That's fucked up.
There's no right or wrong. You can take any dynamic of anything. You can put a spin on it. That's part of the defense mechanism. That's part of the trick of it.
I got one.
Monkey's got one.
Last season of Game of Thrones.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, that's fucked up.
There's a loaded dynamic.
Yep, that's fucked up. The entire last season, but especially the last, 2 episodes.
Oh my god.
You're just like, holy shit, the whole time.
We segue. We go off the rails a little bit. But, hey, whatever works.
No, it isn't.
Shauna, my sister, I am really, really, really glad that we made you laugh, smile. That's part of what it's about. That is the power of love and humor,
Shannon
laughter.
sends some love to the monkey.
Yes. A lot of love for the monkey.
Oh, no, it isn't.
Shannon says this, and this is important. It's a great way to close it out. Having these dynamic people, these interactions, it helps us to find better ways, better paths, strengthen numbers. You know what I mean? We don't have to dance this shit alone.
No.
It's not how it's supposed to be.
That's
okay?
the biggest corporate scam.
Despite when everybody else wants to play their, you know what? That's fine. Let them roll the way they want to roll. Okay? You have free will. Everybody out here has free will. Okay?
Biggest government conspiracy ever to separate nuclear families. You know that?
Well, of course. They're easier to manipulate.
Yeah, because they want you to make new kids and have different nuclear families. And
yes.
Everybody paying for a house.
An endless cycle of drones.
Yes. 2 kids and a dog.
Hey, sometimes a duck is just a fucking duck. So, I'm going to close out the night with a little bit of music. Again, this is another old Broken Past track. It's actually pretty funny. The monkey and I have joked about this particular night. It was from the Stone Pony. And one of the last songs we played that night was our rendition of War Pigs. Now, just as a kind of disclaimer, the guy that we had drumming, by that point in the night, I'm not really sure if it was still him or if it was just the spirit of him. But that or he just was just so fucking high on adrenaline. The song is fast, okay? It's the fastest version, timing-wise, of this song that I've ever done. And to give you that kind of little, the kind of backstage look, it was a bit of a challenge for all of us to stay locked in, me, Monkey, Jim, and Tony, to stay locked in with the gooch. Because homeboy was just drumming to his own tempo. And this motherfucker, he was flying down the fucking highway. He's like, oh, let's just take this and let's just speed it the fuck up.
Yeah.
Still a lot of fun. We still fucking pulled it off.
Pretty sure it was at like Motorhead speed.
Yeah, it was like the Motorhead version of War Pigs. But listen, we're going to close out tonight with a live recording from the Stone Pony, Broken Past, performing our version of War Pigs. Jennifer's like, oh, time for this old person's bedtime. Listen, you're only as fucking as old as you want to believe you are. Fuck that, Jen. Old person. Old person, my ass.
She's my age.
You ain't old, honey.
Yeah.
Fight that shit. You gotta fight for your right.
To party.
See, now you didn't have to do that.
I did.
Well, she did. Anyway, we're gonna close it out with some music. Listen, thank you all again for joining us. Remember, strength in numbers. Hang on. Don't give up. You know what I mean? Together, anything is possible. And until next time, War Pigs.
gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. In the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning. Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh Lord, yeah. Darkness world stops turning, ashes where the body's burning. No more war pigs have the power, hand of God has struck the hour. Day of judgment God is calling, on the knees the war pigs crawling, begging mercies for the sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings. Oh Lord, yeah. Give it up for these guys. Tony Rodriguez, Chris Salazar, Frank Capel, Will Capel, and me. I'm just Jim. to see father and son so close. It warms my heart. All right, Stone Pony!